Hi.
There we are.
How are ya?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm good.
Nice.
I'm turning you up. So it's Hilary Opheim, which I don't correct people because I've heard everything. We were actually at a restaurant once and someone yelled opium. So
Okay.
it's spelled, not spelled the same way, but okay. And my studio is Hilary Opheim Pilates here in LA.
Nice. And you just moved recently, you said.
I opened my studio here. I was in Houston. I
Mhm.
opened it January 6th, and then March 13th, the world changed and everything went. So, yeah,
Yes.
it's been an adventure for sure.
Wow. What made you decide to move from Houston?
Um, I was born and raised there,
Mhm.
and my husband's from Montana, and he's in sales. And he'd been offered things before in different cities and different towns, and I had my career there. I had my studio, my teacher training, my family was there. And then just one day, he got this offer for new territory, which was all the West Coast.
Yes.
And I just was one of those moments where you're like, okay, here's that decision to make, right? Do
Yes.
I
That
accept this
crossroads.
challenge, that crossroad? And I was ready. So I said, let's do it. And that was
Wow. So
it.
there's no way it was as easy as let's do it.
No, I mean
Like,
it was super hard to leave. I had clients for over 25 years.
yes.
Um,
Yeah.
that that was I still can't talk about it. But what's amazing, Martin, is that I moved here and then everything shut down and the virtual, all exploded. And I'm now seeing my clients from Houston each week
Wow.
on
So,
Zoom. So I got to keep some of them, which is
yeah.
awesome.
So originally this was goodbye.
It was
Like,
goodbye. Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
And it was really, really hard. That was probably the worst part. But then, like we've talked about, I always see the positive. I always see and it was just kind of my whole career. And I think you're probably the same, where it's like you get to this point, you can stay where you're safe, you can stay where everything's running in this routine and you're good,
Mhm.
or you can choose to take that step that might be a little scary. And I've
Yes.
always done that. And it was that
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
So that moment is interesting because there's times when I felt like there's another opportunity and I want to jump at that new opportunity, but I feel like it's not because I'm comfortable, but I haven't really maximized the last opportunity.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like this just gut feeling of you've got to move forward. You've got to, I think it's like Pilates. It's like you got to keep
Right.
going, keep moving forward and not just be in that safe little
Hmm.
world sometimes.
Right. Do you find it easier to say yes to things or just say no to things?
So, well, okay, so in my personal life, I
Yes, this
don't
is just a
I
total like
I don't like
theoretical
change.
question.
I don't like change. I like a routine, which is
Mhm.
interesting. But in my business, it's the total opposite. I
Yeah.
want to keep exploring and learning. So, um, my husband jokes that when we got married, we would have a plan to do something that evening, and he would want to change it. So he would say, "Oh, we're not going to go here. We're going to go here." Like if someone called and something, and then
Yes.
he'd walk away because he knew I needed time to absorb
Just
that new
process
information,
that. Yeah.
process it.
Yeah.
Because my initial thing would be no, no.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I think in most cases I tend to say yes just to please,
Mhm.
but I want no a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
I'm sure
I don't know.
nobody can connect with that at all. Like,
No, not at
no,
all.
no
It's
one at
like
all.
I'll just say yes and everyone will be fine. Yeah.
Right. That's so true, eh? Like we just that I mean, I'm really stuck on a decision-making process. It seems like, we should be talking about Pilates and stuff, but like that's one of those things where there's so many different dynamics to it, right? Where you feel like
Yeah.
I'm comfortable, I'm not gonna move, and then there's this push, and then you finally do it, and then you realize, well, what was I scared of? Like, why didn't I do this move
Yeah.
before? Like, what was it? Like, what was I really pushing back against this?
And it
Or
also, I mean, to our whole drive out to LA was this comedy of errors. Everything that could go wrong went wrong.
mhm.
Um, but we met the most amazing people that we would not have met
Yes.
if we hadn't. And I feel like that's what happens when you do that, kind of getting out of that, is it leads you to people that you never would have come across
Right. Yep.
or had in your life.
True. Right.
Yeah.
The piece that I think we miss is like actually writing that down somewhere in our brain or even on paper, so that the next time we're in this decision making process, we can go, you know what, that move actually was scary, but it turned out okay. Let's go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be a t-shirt, Martin.
It's saying what?
I don't know. We've got to come up with some.
Okay.
I don't know what it'll be.
Just make a t-shirt though. Yeah.
Just make a t-shirt. It solves
Right.
everything.
It does. It does. So we've done that so many times here. We're like, so am I. Like, oh, like, like we've for everything. And we're like, yeah, that should be a t-shirt. That should be a
Yeah.
t-shirt. We should make a t-shirt that says that should be a t-shirt.
That is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah.
I'll buy one.
I before going on this, I don't usually like to do a lot of like background study, just so the conversation is like more organic. But instead of like studying your whole like genealogy of how many people you trained and where you've been and
Yeah.
stuff, I do glance at it a little bit. I have to say this morning though, like I found your conversation with Jenna Zaffino, who is
I love her.
yeah, she's a good friend. Like she's
She's
solid
a good friend. Yeah. She's found it.
and
I like, yeah. Known
so
her for a long
grounded.
time. Yeah.
So in the conversation, I figured let me just listen to it for a few minutes, and I ended up listening to the whole thing as I was getting ready this morning because it's so good. Because it was just like this, just this chill conversation. You guys just cracked jokes and talked about like so many different things. And one of the things that you guys were talking about was your infectious positivity. Like you're such a nice person. You are quote unquote the nicest person in the industry, sort of like as she coined it, right?
She did.
Um, yeah, it's so funny because I mean, like I get that too. And as soon as I heard you say that, I remember this one time I was talking with my 14-year-old son, and he's frustrated with his basketball or something, and he just yells out. He's like, "You're just so nice all the time." Like you were like, "I'm always so
Like it's
good
a
for
bad
you."
thing.
Like it's just so positive. Everything's so positive. You could do nothing wrong. Like, he could play a terrible game. It's like, did you see your defense though? Do you see the way you cheer for guys when they're coming off the court though? Did you see, like, I'm always looking at things from the positive, even in the worst
Yeah.
situation, which annoys him because he feels like he can't get like a straight answer on what he needs to get done. I don't know.
I,
Like, yeah. So I don't know. I just threw that out there because I know that, you're a pretty
yeah,
positive person. Like, how do you
I
feel about
am.
that?
I it's just kind of sometimes like when I don't know, maybe you can relate, but when COVID hit and everything shut down and there was a week where it was like I really was not myself. I was not that positive and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what now?" Um but then of course it's who we are, it's in our wiring, right? So I kind of almost felt where I was almost feeling like I had to apologize because everyone's on social media and just doom and gloom and gloom. And I just couldn't go. I wanted, you know, like you,
Yes.
but did you see this or did you, it's like, but
Hmm.
it doesn't mean because we're like that and positive and always trying to see the positive and the silver lining and it's going to lead us somewhere. I mean, you have to think that way. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean we're not realistic.
No,
Doesn't
no,
mean we don't know
exactly.
what's going on.
Right.
But I just feel like I don't know. It's just my mother said you can choose to wake up and be happy or not. And
Yeah.
I just choose that. And it's like some people don't like it. It's annoying.
Well, misery loves company, right? Like,
Yeah. And I feel like and I don't know about you, but don't you feel you attract those people that are positive? You attract those people that
yeah,
want to be in that. And those that are
I
negative
do.
and drama
Yeah.
just tend to like not last around you, which is fine.
Yeah, no, they don't. But you know what? Between you and I and whoever's watching right now, um, those people who are negative sometimes, I almost make it a sport to crack them.
You sound like my husband.
How can I just crack them? How can I get them to see things from another perspective? Oh, but what about this? But what about this? Well, like it
And
becomes
sometimes that will
sport.
work. Yeah.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it's so fun to like
Yeah.
just throw jabs at them. I don't know.
It's
It's just,
entertaining, right?
it's if nothing else, it's selfishly for me to see if I could just get a W or
Get it
not.
going. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think I'd rather be someone who can see the positive for sure.
Mhm.
'Cause life is,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this
There's always
last
something,
year has
right?
proven that. Yeah, there is. I feel like you may not see it in the moment, but
Mhm.
looking back,
Right.
you'll see.
Right. And when there's a saying like in management, you say like you complain up and you encourage down sort of thing. Like there's a sense of like if I am in a funk or I am worried about stuff, I'll kind of just pull away. And my wife teases me about going to my cocoon, right? Where I just lock the world out, write
Yep.
some stuff down, and then come back out happy again, right? Like that's so I just
Oh
don't
yeah, I can
you know,
relate.
like you don't necessarily broadcast and just bring everyone down with you, but
Right. It doesn't mean
go.
you don't have those moments. You
That's
just
the whole
don't
point. Yeah.
you don't spread it out to the world.
Yeah. I mean, there's times too. I mean, like I use social media for that, where I've had some down moments and some really
Hmm.
dark seasons, and I'll put stuff out there just so people know where I'm at. But I'm also hopeful that I'll get out of it at some point.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know what I
I've
mean?
done the
So
same. Yeah.
yeah, so you put the journey out there because it's part of the journey. This isn't my destination, this dark corner that I'm in right
Right.
now.
It's just a moment in time.
Yes, yes, exactly. So I'm just reading Kai's comment here. It's part of what makes you bump the news on my radio in the morning. Your sport of finding positivity. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because it helps, it helps to hear. It makes, it's like I don't know who, I think it was my grandmother said I was a Pollyanna. So
Okay.
I don't, yeah, so I joke that I live in a Pollyanna bubble. Just meaning that I'm not going to let all that negativity just kind of seep in, and
Right.
because I think people like that comment, we need that.
We do. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Rather be contagious with positivity than with negativity.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me about your teacher training from back in the day in Houston to what you're doing now. Like, I guess it's more virtual now than anything, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
I
But in
start
its origins, right? Yeah.
yeah, I started it just because I was having, like probably a lot of people, I was having trouble finding teachers.
Okay.
And I also realized, do you remember the first teacher training you go through and you go into your first Pilates studio and you feel like
Yes.
everyone's staring at you and
Yes.
they don't know why are you there and you don't know anything. Um, and I just wanted to create a teacher training that really gave that confidence to the teacher, that when they entered the world, they had that confidence of, I'm good. I know what I'm doing.
Yes.
I'm going to explore. I wanted to instill that kind of feeling of when you leave teacher training, there's just so much to explore and
Hmm.
do, and kind of that hunger and passion that I have. I wanted that in my students. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of where it came from,
Yeah.
just to get them to continue that. Because the worst thing is you get out of teacher training and you just stop learning,
Right. Exactly.
stop
I'll get
exploring.
I'll get to that question in a second there. Um, but with that teacher training program, how did you actually prepare them? Because, this is going to sound like a weird question, but you're such a positive person, and people can be mean sometimes. You get out in the real world, and then
Oh, yeah,
you
been there.
have women and men who have been doing Pilates for 17 million years, and then their arms crossed, like, okay, impress me, Miss New Teacher. How do we
Yeah.
prepare them for those type of moments?
I don't know. And I think social media, like when I started this, social media was not a thing. So it was kind of, I was in a little bubble. I didn't really
Yes.
have to. Um, but I kind of, it's, it's just a sticky situation because I think there's still this thought process of, if you aren't this and you aren't this, then you're not a teacher. And it's so not true, because the best teachers are the ones that are passionate,
Hmm.
that study, that learn, that listen, um, that see their clients. And it doesn't really matter their lineology or whatever you want to
Yes.
say. Um, So I do kind of prepare them in terms of, don't let those people get you down. Believe in yourself. Stay focused. I think that's the main thing. Like I
Stay
think when
focused.
you were talking about teacher training in the intro to this and about
Mhm.
how to kind of find your one, person to kind of, or, I
Yes, you find
tell
your
them that
Joseph
it's,
sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like, you find what works for you and you'll go out
Mhm.
and you'll find someone that speaks to you in that moment. Like our journey always changes. So I
Yes.
let them know it's like there's no right or wrong. It's just for you. And
Hmm.
I think with social media, it's a lot of noise a lot of times, and
Absolutely.
they need to just, you know, I mean, I'm one that I'm not a fan of social media and I'm not comfortable with, but now it's kind of part of what we do, right? It's
Yes,
kind of
totally. Yeah.
there. So I'll just keep my Pollyanna going out there. But
There you
yeah.
go.
And there's some, not nice people, but we just gotta, my husband's like, vent for a moment and let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you cultivate people's their why or their ideal client piece too? More the ideal client. So like, if I ask pretty much everyone who comes on, who is your ideal client? So let me just start with that piece of it. For someone who is the type of person who would come into your studio that you would be like, I would train you for free for life because you are just
Yeah.
an awesome, super fun, right in my wheelhouse type of person. Like, who is that for you, first of all?
So for me, that client is someone who is curious,
Hmm.
who I joke that there's no I can't do this, there's no
Yes.
I'm not capable. So it's that client that we just have this kind of cohesive little cocoon of a relationship where it's like we trust each other
Hmm.
and they're willing to challenge themselves in a way that makes them happy. So
Yes.
not what I want for them,
Hmm.
but I don't want that client that walks in and wants, a flatter belly or, make my
Right.
glutes look like this. I want someone that's like I want to be 80 years old playing golf.
Yeah. Right.
That's yeah. And I find like we talked about, I find that those that are like not happy people tend to not last. It's my client because I guess
Yeah.
they're kind of like she's just a little too much.
Right.
Yeah,
You
but
seem to be okay with that.
I am because I want to be around people that want to be there, want to be present.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Let me get back to this question. Hillary, what did you dive into with Pilates during this pandemic? So is there, I guess is asking like,
I'm not sure I understand that question.
well, I'm thinking like the way
What
like
did
if
I
you want
dive
to,
into?
yeah, did you focus on
Okay,
anything?
like
Like how did
outside of
you,
yeah,
or even
so
within, right?
like
Like,
I said, yeah, we moved here and our original whole idea was we would kind of rent apartments in different areas and kind of see where we wanted to live. And then the pandemic hit and we're like, okay, let's start looking for somewhere to actually live, like a house. So that's kind of one thing that's been what we dove into as totally separate from Pilates is looking for a house. And we're not in any rush, but we've gotten to explore LA. We've gotten to see different neighborhoods. We've met different people. It's a little
mhm,
different with COVID. You have to fill out all these forms if you go into a
yeah,
house, and it's interesting. But that's kind of what we dived into a bit
mhm,
was kind of find. And plus, it's fun to look at houses, even if you can't
totally,
afford.
yes, totally. It's always fun.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah,
So besides, I mean, Pilates. Yeah, I just kind of had to figure that out. But
yeah, get sharp with the virtual piece, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So back to the program. So this ideal client that we're talking about,
yeah,
and you just mentioned, I love the word curious. Anytime someone puts curious up in there, like as soon as Caroline's, but like curiosity and openness, like yes, like
Yes.
I love that, right? Like people are just want to explore the boundaries of what their body can do,
Yeah, exactly.
and then trusting us to get them there is just such a treat.
Yeah, when you have a client, and I know you have these moments where you know they can do something, and you know
Yes.
that you prepared them, and they've got the strength, they've got the body awareness, and they kind of give you that look of I don't know, and you're like,
Yes.
you can do this. We've done this. You can do this, and they're like, okay, because they trust you. They're like, okay,
Yes.
and then they do it, and
Right.
they just light up, and
Right.
you're like,
I love that.
that's like the best.
That is the
That is
best.
that is the best.
And there's two pieces to that are the best for me. One, when I tell them that this is where we're going, and two, when I don't tell them that this is where we're going.
Yeah, and all of a sudden they're there.
And then they're there. Like that is like I think that was better for me because I'm just like they're like I don't
Their
know if he
eyes
was
are
like
like, oh my God.
yeah, it's like we just did 9 exercises to set this up. You can get it. Go. Let's try this. And then they're
Yeah,
like yes, like or when I open up and show them a stupid, ridiculous exercise, they go, we're doing this today. And they're like, never. I'm like, okay, well, let's just start with our rolling like a ball. And then eventually you get there. And then they're just, I can't believe I pulled that off. I'm like, I knew you could. Like, that's
yeah,
why we're here, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And I love another ideal client, like when you've been working with them and they start to then ask those questions and understand like all the connections of where they
Yes.
started and the workout, where they're going. They're like,
Hmm.
I have one client that at the end of it, she'll say, "So what were you working on with me? What was your goal with
Yes.
me?" And I'll say, "What do you think it was?" And
Hmm.
she'll
Ooh.
usually give the answer because she'll say, "Well, I my hip was really tight and it feels better now." And I'm like,
Mm.
"There you go. We were working on. I don't
Yes.
know what was wrong, but that's where I was going." So I almost
Yes.
want them to kind of answer for me, but I
Yes.
love when they're that into it and that
Yes.
vested in it.
Yes. Absolutely. Just really connected with their body and
Exactly.
the process.
Yeah.
It's
Can't go wrong.
interesting. Oh yeah, that's I know, eh? And it's funny, eh? Because like as people go through that process, they're getting stronger. They're doing all these things. They're recognizing these different things happening in their body. And the conversation I was having with a client this morning was around the idea of being in shape, so to speak, right?
That's a loaded.
I know,
Yeah.
right? And then it was like we ended up talking for probably a good 10, 15 minutes before we actually started moving because it was like, well, 5 years ago, I was doing boot camp and I was doing these, F45, and I was in shape back then. And now I'm
Right.
doing, and then there's this big gap with COVID, and now I'm here. And I was like, it's going to look different this time around. So even when you are in shape again, it's not going to be the in shape that you were 5 years ago. You might have
Yeah,
been,
that's important to
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's like you might have been lighter back then, but you're stronger now. Or you might have been able to do this whole workout without huffing, but you're going to go back to it and your movement's going to be so much more efficient.
You won't be
You're
huffing like that.
you won't be huffing anymore because you'll be moving with ease. Like it's just like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So like I was just challenging her to reevaluate what in shape means.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it's important for people to think about what in shape means in terms of movement. Like
Yes.
a look is not someone can look in shape and they're not in shape.
Right.
And I think that, do you want to be able to move better? Do you want to have,
Hmm.
freedom to do these sports or whatever it is you do, pick up your
Yes.
grandkids,
Right.
you know, carry your
Right.
bags, whatever. But it's interesting. I had a conversation with a client who I've taught for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And she said, well, I used to be able to do this. I don't understand why I can't. And I'm like, well, we're not 30 and
Yes.
everything changes and our goals change and the way we
Hmm. Hmm.
move and what we need to focus on. And we can't compare ourselves to when we were 20, when we were whatever. I'm not going to give
Yes.
my age, but
Yes.
it's like life does things to us, our movement
Yes.
patterns,
Yes.
stress. Yeah.
Right. It's so funny, because we say that like you're lying, we're not 30. And then I have someone like that guy who I had on Friday, Granville, who is a year older than me. He's 46 and he broke world records at 40. So
See, it
he would
doesn't
sit here
matter.
and be like, age is not a number. And I think it's our mindset
Totally
around the
agree.
number,
It
right?
is a mindset. They're like, well, I'm 60 or I'm this. But,
Yeah.
I had a client in Houston, and he came to me in his 70s, and I
Hmm.
trained him through his 80s. Um, and he'd walk in the studio. You would never know how old he was. He was
Hmm.
standing tall. He played golf. He gardened. He did all this stuff. So age is, for him, he didn't think about, well, I'm this old. I need to be making sure this is how I
Yeah.
do things. But
Right. So here comes the hard question then. Why do we make age a secret,
I don't
especially when we're
know.
fit?
I don't know. I know for women, it's always been this, oh, you don't tell your age because, growing old is bad. Um, but I don't know, because to me, it's like if you feel good and you're, happy and does it, I mean, I'd rather have a birthday than not, right? That's what I told my husband because
Touche.
my husband's on the other. It's like, oh my God, I'm this old. Oh my God, 5 more years will be this. Five more. And I'm like, oh my God, you can't think like that. It's like, we're here. We have a birthday. It's like, great, let's celebrate.
Yes, would you
I
rather not
don't,
have a birthday? That's a great
exactly.
line.
Because the opposite is not a good thing. It's like,
Right.
I'd rather say, this is my age. And I'll be 55 in April. So
Amazing. Yeah.
there you go.
Right. Yes. And we move. Like we're
Yeah.
active. We're like so. I joke with my clients now. Like, I'm doing something like, this is actually the best. This is the funny thing. My female clients. I'm putting my coffee down to say this because like I laugh so hard when this happened. I have these ladies I would train. So this one lady, she was like, she's an esthetician and she's just everything is just so beautiful and prim and proper, and she never, you don't let people know your age and you have to be so proper and all these different things. So I training her and she keeps everything just connected and she's doing well. And then I'm doing exercise and it's so hard and she's like, I'm 55, you can't give this to me because so it just 1 minute is like, don't tell people your age. And the next minute is like, this is so hard. You better remind him that you're old.
Yeah.
And, so then it becomes this little bit of an argument. I'm like, you are too fit to use the age card, okay?
Yeah. That doesn't work here.
It
Yeah.
doesn't work here. So I chuckled. I was like, wait a minute. I thought like you were not supposed to tell anyone your age. And now you're telling me your age just because you don't want to do an exercise?
You're
Like,
using your age and
yeah. I was like,
it.
no,
No.
no, it's not going to work.
I've had that where clients, I'll tell them, okay, we're doing this, blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, do you remember how old I am? It's like, no, you're, you're, I don't care.
Can't seem to care.
Yeah, I have one client. She's like, she'll say something, like that, or I can't, or whatever. And I'll just look at her and she's like, you don't care, do you? And I'm like, no, you're doing it. Let's go.
Yes,
I don't care.
straight face. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's
I
a
love
nice
that.
way to be mean. Like we can do this.
Yeah. I
Yeah, with a
mean,
smile.
it's with a smile. I have one client that, yeah, she knows when I'm giving her something challenging because she says I'll get a wicked little smile. And she's like, oh, here she goes. There she
Mm-hmm.
goes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But, we're there to guide and to challenge them. So my feeling is it's like, you can do this.
Right.
It's like
Yep.
55. I don't care. Go for it.
Mhm. Right. Exactly. And if they trust us, and
Exactly.
we have their best interests
Best
at heart.
interest. We're not going to let them get hurt. We're
No, this
keeping them
isn't
safe.
malicious. We're not trying
No.
to. No.
No, we want them to be able to jump out of bed the next morning, not just
Right.
be like crawling down the hallway.
Yep.
Yep. Been there, done that. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So funny. As so, I did do some research. You're like in terms of your teacher training programs. Can you just talk about how you found Pilates originally?
Yeah. So
Hmm.
our backgrounds are kind of similar because I came from the fitness world and I taught, this is going to age me again, Um, step
Which we cleared,
aerobics.
we just
Yeah,
established that is
we
just okay.
established it. Yeah. I mean, the leggings and the tights and
The
um
unitards
the
and
unitards, the fuchsia colors.
lovely.
Yeah, I taught aerobics, box aerobics. Well, it was not called bar, but we did like ballet things. What else did it? Spinning. I taught spinning, all of that. And I actually ran a group fitness um, program in a club.
Okay.
And so I was doing all these classes. If someone didn't show up, I had to jump in. So my knees started to bother me. And
Hmm.
one of my friends who was one of my teachers in the gym or the fitness center was a Pilates teacher who had been a
Cool.
dancer. And this was before certification. So she had a small little room in a church that had like a Cadillac and a reformer. And she's like, "You've got to come do this and I'll help you."
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember I got on the reformer, put my feet up. She told me to push out. I did one push out and I was like, where has this been my whole life? My body just
Yes.
immediately was like craving. And so I just started doing Pilates with her every week on a Friday, and my knees got better. I felt better. I was moving better. And she's like, "Oh, you need to, go to John Gossett, who was my mentor. You need to go
Mhm.
learn how to teach." I was like, "Oh, I can't do that. That's too hard. I can't teach this." And she's like, "No, yeah." And so she kind of pushed me in that direction,
Yes.
and that was it. And then once I went through my teacher training, everything else kind of dropped off my radar in terms of teaching because it
Yes.
was just, I was, that was it. I was like,
You
this is the
just
best.
so immersed, completely immersed in it.
Yeah, yeah, because it made everything else easier. It made every movement that I had been doing, my husband and I still, we did the MS 150 and all this stuff on bikes. And it was
Yes.
like, this was, and then I just had to share it with everybody. So
Right. Because you're a positive person. That's what we do.
yeah, it's like you got
Yeah.
to do this.
You
Yeah.
gotta share the love. You gotta share the joy.
Why are you not doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I never heard of John Gossett before, I must say. Like, I mean, who's like,
John Gossett was, excuse me, we lost him, I guess, 2 years ago. It's still hard to talk
hmm,
about, but he was with the Houston Ballet and
okay,
actually brought Pilates to Houston in terms of,
wow,
getting it started. He and Alan Herdman was uh,
yes,
pivotal in that as well.
okay,
And so when I went through my training, he was it. That was it. And we couldn't, I remember he called his studio. It was on the street called East Side. So it was East
okay,
Side Studios. You couldn't say Pilates.
yes,
Everything was going through the roof. And so we had to answer the phone and we had to say we were learning Pilates based stuff. And
hmm,
we couldn't say what we were actually learning, meaning we couldn't say we taught Pilates, we taught
yes. Flies
Pilates
movements
based
are,
movement. Yeah.
yes,
Um, but he was someone that my whole career I would go to in terms of, and that's why I think it's so important to, treasure who teaches us and treasure those mentors that we go through our life because
hmm,
I went to him multiple times,
hmm,
hey, I'm struggling with this, or when I wanted to open up my own studio, I went to him and asked, is this cool? Is this okay? Do you think I'm
yes,
ready?
yeah,
Um, and it was important to me that I showed him, you know, what he meant
yes,
to me and to respect because he just was this amazing person that had this. I remember, and you'll relate. He was. I was practicing with a fellow student, and she made something up. Well, she thought she made something up on
okay,
the Cadillac, and he's walking by, and she said, look, John, look what I made up." And without missing a beat, he just kept walking. He's like, "I do that all the time." It was just this dry. And she was like, "What?" Yeah.
it is like for her, she just fully, just intuitively developed this, but
Yeah.
it's already
It was
out in the world,
all
and I already
her.
do
It was all her exercise. Like, "I do that all the time." It was like, she's like, "What?"
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. He was great. But
So
yeah,
did
that just,
I'm sorry to say. So did
oh
he
no.
study with Romana? Like, what's his lineage? Because
No,
it's
what's
just
funny
interesting.
is there's an interview because I did an interview with him. And he told this story, which I'd never heard before, but he had his studio. He was teaching Pilates, and he met, I think it was Romana's son.
Okay.
And his son told John, "Oh, you need to go to New York and study with my mom." And he's
Hmm.
like, "Why would I do that? I already teach. I don't need to." So he didn't,
Hmm.
even though he got the opportunity. But I'm glad he didn't, because I feel like the way I learned with him was very very kind of traditional, and very um, just it was this kind of, it was his kind of
Yeah,
being. Do you know what I mean? It
absolutely.
was so I feel lucky about that, just the way he was. But yeah, he had that opportunity, and it's funny because he was like, he didn't know at that
Right.
moment who she was or
Right.
anything like that. But he's like, "Why would I do that? I already teach
Yes.
Pilates."
So who did he learn from?
I don't know that answer.
Interesting.
I don't know. I think he probably learned, because
How
this was before
mysterious.
certifications, right?
Yes.
And I'll have to, maybe I'll ask Alan Herdman. Maybe I'll ask him and see what he
Yeah.
says. But um I know that, he was doing it with the Houston Ballet for years.
Right.
And then kind of got into
Yeah.
his own studio and his own thing, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Not that it
Yeah, but
matters,
it's
but
funny
it's
because no,
fascinating.
and I think that's key for me, is because that's not something I ask someone right off the bat when
Yes.
when I meet someone. Is like, who trained you? Where did you learn? Because to me, it's like it's not the question about
It's not the question,
someone's
right?
teaching. No,
Hmm.
no. So I think I I'm happy that I feel lucky that I got to learn from him. And those that knew him, it's like the same. When we lost him, it was horrible. Um,
Mm.
but it was a huge loss to the community. And
Yes.
I feel like, he even though he wasn't, so-called first generation, or but
Whatever.
yeah, whatever, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing too, because when I had Kathy Strack, Baker Strack on here, Barker Strack, Barker.
Yeah.
So she was saying, there's so many people out there who would be considered elders, but this hierarchy and the structure labels
Yeah,
some people, and just, I mean, so there's probably hundreds of people there
there
who
are. Yeah.
who were taught like by whatever, and there's this whole
There's people
lineage.
out there that were taught by Joseph that no one
No one
talks
knows.
about, or
Right,
yeah.
exactly. Right. So who knows? I mean, so even though like you don't know the story on John, it's just fascinating that that's yet another example of someone who has learned, and your quote unquote lineage is through this person that doesn't stem directly from Romana, so to speak, right?
Right.
And it's really irrelevant because it's the same as some kid coming out of university with his MBA who has no clue, and another person who's worked in the industry forever who can close $1 million in sales in the first week. Like, you're good
Yeah,
or you're not good, right? Like, you're passionate
exactly.
or you're not passionate. You're curious or you're not curious. Like,
Yeah. And
yeah,
there's bad teachers that come out of every training, and there's good
yes,
teachers.
yes,
It comes to their passion
yep,
and why they want to be a teacher. I think that's key. It's like I ask people when they come to me for teachers, why do you want to teach
mm-hmm,
Pilates? If it's
mm-hmm.
because, well, I like the hours, or I heard you make good money. Oh, yeah,
Okay,
no.
here's the door. Yes,
Here's the door. Bye
yes,
bye. Yeah.
bye. I had this lady on, Gloria Gasperi was on, and in her Italian accent, she was so sweet, and she said it this
I
way.
just love that.
She just says, like, there are good teachers who know 5 exercises, and there's bad teachers who know 1,000 exercises.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I remember John Gossett told me, he said, I think it was Teaser on the Box on the Reformer, and we were learning it and going through it. And he said, you'll have clients that will never see this exercise.
Mm,
And you'll have
right.
clients that will, just because something like candlestick or this or that, um, doesn't mean you give it to that person. And I think that's key too, when you see teachers giving, like we talked about, you're giving things to your client they need
Hmm.
to move them or challenge them, not to make you look like you know all this information.
Right.
And I think that's a good, I see that a lot where it's like, it's not about the teacher,
Hmm.
it's about
Yeah.
the client
Right.
and them.
And
I
then,
think,
yeah. And now in your teacher training, when you have like bridge students coming through, what are some of the gaps that you see? What are some of the things that you see based on other, and not, I'm not asking you to knock other teacher training programs and stuff,
oh
but like,
no,
you know,
because I think we should always constantly be learning,
yes.
and so anything that speaks to you, dive in.
Hmm.
Um, no, I think it's more with any teacher training where people get out and they've been teaching for 5 years. Usually it's about 5 years.
Okay.
And then they start to feel a little lost. And it
Hmm.
might not be their training, it's just the fact that they've been teaching for 5 years. And now it's kind of like that moment where you're like, I need
Like
more.
like a
Um,
reset or just like more tools in our
More
toolbox?
just deep diving, kind of like in your toolbox. Like I
Hmm.
feel, I'll use as an
Oh, we lost your volume there.
in her studio. Oh,
It's
can
back
you
now.
hear me?
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
just
okay.
sorry. Can you just repeat that last piece again?
So I'll use one example of a teacher. She'd been training for 5 years, teaching for 5 years.
Hmm.
And she was with her client and all of a sudden she realized, why am I giving this? What's the purpose of this? I'm feeling lost. So it's more of not maybe understanding the why or the how of every aspect of the work or
Yes.
the exercises.
Hmm.
Um, for me, it's them understanding that this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. If
Yes.
someone can't do this, that doesn't mean they can't do this.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, and just kind of getting into the brain of the movement and
Hmm.
the purpose of it. And I feel that when they see that and they understand that, it's this confidence that comes like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. And
Hmm.
I think just people get a little lost sometimes, like you were talking about, um, focusing on one. So I remember, and
Yes.
you'll relate, I'm sure everyone who's a teacher, you go to the PMA, you go to these big conferences, and there's 2 hours with a teacher, and there's all these different, and it's
Yes.
just like you go home and you're like, what just did I learn?
Right.
So I'm like,
And
oh.
yes.
So I kind of feel like when I get people in the bridging, it's these moments of just we're going to focus and deep dive here, and it's this one.
Yes.
And I also like to kind of go with what they need. So it's like you kind of like think, oh, this is what I need. I'm missing this.
Hmm.
But then you get in, you're like, oh wait,
Oh.
oh yeah. So that's what I love about it is I think, I mean, I have every year where I do some deep dive in something
Hmm.
for me, and I think everyone should, you know,
Absolutely.
because it reignites that passion. It reignites that, takes that routine of, you know,
Yes.
teaching, sometimes gets,
Absolutely.
yeah.
The analogy that I received when I was doing my last apprenticeship program was like I graduated and they were like, this is like getting your driver's license,
I
right?
love that.
So
Yeah.
you're safe to operate a vehicle, full stop. I mean,
Yeah,
I
I love
can't
it.
race like with like, Lewis Hamilton and join the F1 now. I'm not that competent. I'm safe to operate a vehicle. But now I can go to a track this weekend. I can go take some advanced teacher training. I can do some cornering or skidding or whatever. I
Yeah.
can dive deep in one corner and get really, really proficient with my driving
Yes.
or
I
get my
love
like
that.
my stock car license and my F1 license and then all these different licenses all the way
Yeah.
along, right? Like
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's like that to some degree, right? Like just
It's
because we did one
exactly
thing.
like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's like you said, it's like get really good at the cornering, right? And then you get
Yes.
really good at this. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly. Instead of like this big massive thing.
Yes.
Um, I don't know when you opened your studio and stuff, but I remember reading something, I can't remember the book, but they talked about focus on one thing you're
Yes.
good at. And
Yes.
so I've kept that in my brain. And I think that's what we also have to think about when we think about continuing education and we think about our own kind of personal feeding of our teaching kind of soul is
Hmm.
what we're good at and what's going to feed into that
What's
for
going to
us.
feed into that? Yep.
Yeah. I think
So
that's
good.
key. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just like, oh, I
I
don't know.
know. Yeah, exactly. We could run in like 10 directions at the same time
Yeah, because
and
there's a
not be good
lot
at
of
anything.
directions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're just like a white hot mess. That's how I look
Yes. Yep. So true.
Yeah.
This Hillary, this like 57 minutes. Like that just flew by.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And
Seriously.
yeah, it has so many things I want to touch on still. So I think we need to do this again sometime.
So fun.
Yes.
Yeah, we cannot wait as long as we did.
I know. And we can't even, I don't even know how long we waited. Like,
I
I need
don't
to
know.
like, need to
We'll
go
age
back.
ourselves yet again,
Right, exactly.
although you're young.
Just to hit some of these comments real quick. Yes, train the body in front of you.
Yes.
Um, Jessica was saying earlier, Romana wasn't the only one. So true.
Yep.
Lori Coleman Brown was in the room. Hi.
Hi.
The
She's up early.
Yeah, I know, eh? Yes. A strong older client is injured. How do you deal with that? That was a question that came earlier. Um,
That's
yeah,
a, yeah. Injured how, I wonder.
yeah.
I think
That
that's, yeah.
that is really that's one of those it depends answers, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's so many different factors that tie into that. But yes, thank you to all of your
Hi,
comments, and
Lori.
yes, we have lots of awesome people here. Just one last thing here. I think it's interesting. Like we throw around that phrase "train the body in front of you" all the time in the Pilates
Mm-hmm.
world, right? And
Yep.
you've heard that, and that's all part of that, contemporary versus classical dialogue and all that stuff. I was talking with someone who is in like just the general fitness world, and I said, you train the body in front of you, and he was just like, oh, like it was like, I was like, I say that like,
Light bulb.
yeah, I'm like, dude, we say that like 10 times a day in Pilates. Like it didn't like for him it was brilliant, and I was like, I guess we do take it for granted some of the things that we learn across
I
there.
think we do, yeah. But I think that's just something we have to really remember every moment that client walks in is we're training that body to
Yes,
move to its full range and its ability
yes,
and what they're capable of. And it's different than the next person and the next person,
yes,
which is really the beautiful thing of what we get to do.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. On that
So fun.
note, yes. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a fun conversation, a great way to start my
So
Monday.
fun. So fun. I loved our coffee chat, Martin.
Mhm. All right, I'm going to sign you off and I'll send you the replay there.
Bye, guys.
Okay, thank you
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
All right. Thank you guys for joining me tomorrow. At this point, it's a free test, free